So my name is Mike Reiner. I do business development for venture capital for Amazon Web Services. I've done several of my own things. I'm ex-founder. One of them is also I've co-founded an accelerator, a B2B accelerator called Startup Wise Guys, where I invested in more than 40 B2B companies. And so over the last years, I've been lucky enough to see many startups in different parts of the world, emerging markets and more mature markets. And that's why I'm here to talk about, like Andy and Simon asked me to talk about breaking borders. In particular, I'm going to talk about one specific conversation I had with an entrepreneur. So as I said, I work for Amazon Web Services. The perks of this job and also what I've done with the accelerator is that I travel a lot, probably 75% of my time at the moment. And going to all these cities and meeting all these entrepreneurs, every single time you encounter a special story. And when you go to countries like Africa, for instance, it might be more local stories. I met the entrepreneur the other day that built a local energy grid, so for villages, essentially solar-based, and anyone in the village with his phone prepaid could just pay for energy by the minute. And you see much more global plays. But one specific entrepreneur I want to talk about, his name is Nigel. So I met Nigel in this building, looks like a hashtag in Tbilisi, Georgia. And I was speaking at the conference afterwards. We have a dinner, and I happened to sit next to Nigel, and we start talking. And I was about to order a beer for him, and he tells me that he doesn't drink. So just as a conversation starter, I ask, oh, so how come you don't drink? And he just says, well, I have these challenges for myself, and it all started with cheese. I was like, cheese? So now tell me about that cheese. But before he could answer, there's another entrepreneur coming, and the discussion goes the other way. So the whole evening, I do not get to that question, like, what about the cheese? And at the end of the evening, he tells me, so Mike, I really want to show you something special. So I ask him, is this related to the cheese? And he say, no, we're going to talk about the cheese later. So he takes me to a place, it's called Jumo. It's in Yerevan. So we arrive at this building, and I look at this and ask, Nigel, what is this? And he says, this is the future of education. So we have all these amazing things out there, like Khan Academy. We have like all the online courses. Nowadays, people can educate themselves on anything online, right? I think education is going to massively change already now, but it's changing much faster. But he says, look, this is very special. Let me show you. So we walked inside, and I see kids playing everywhere. I see them play with robots. I see them like play around with drones, and they're sitting behind computers. And I asked Nigel, what is this? And he says, this is like a post-school educational center where kids would go after school, and they would learn about new technologies. They would log in, they have their own social network, and they would get challenges, and they're all gamified. So they would get a challenge about photography. They would get challenged about like robotics, about programming, about design, about anything. And all those children would go in the building to these different rooms to complete those challenges. And I was just stunned. I was just looking at this. I was like, this is amazing. If I would have something like this when I was a kid, I think I would have never left that place, honestly. I probably would have gone to school as well. I would probably just stayed there. So we start walking around and, past all those rooms, and we see these kids play, and we start discussing the potential of technology and how technology is disrupting every single industry, right? So we walk past this one room where we see kids print all kinds of different objects, and we talk about 3D printing. And I think not all people realize what 3D printing actually means, because it's essentially going to disrupt the entire supply chain. Because in the future, we're going to print most of the stuff that we need at home. We don't need to necessarily go out anymore. I think what that means for designers, right? Copyright. How we're also going to regulate this. What's going to prevent us from printing guns at home? So think about what that's going to do to the industry. And then when we look at 3D printing, it's not only just printing stuff, but people look at like printing food, like it's about printing organs. It's going to be a very broad field, and it's going to change how we create things. But then as we walk further, we see this room where kids are playing with robots. Right? So we also discuss and start discussing robots, and what the impact of robots are. And I think robots have been around for a very long time. In factories, we've seen robots, for the last 30, 40 years. But nowadays, more and more, we're creating robots in our own shape and form that we've seen in science fiction movies for a long time. And they're getting increasingly sophisticated. So I'm not sure how many of you have seen, for instance, Boston Dynamics and the videos out there. If you haven't, you should definitely watch them. So they created animal-shaped robots and human-shaped robots, right? And they can conquer very, very complex territory. So they walk through woods and complete very, very sophisticated tasks. And what's very, very interesting about this is, in these videos, the creators would, for instance, kick a robot and try to just show the people how they can balance themselves. If they're kicked over, they would get up again and start walking. And reactions online were stunning. People would complain. People would say, how can you kick this thing? That's not right. That doesn't feel right. I mean, look at them. They don't even look like us. But think about the emotion that triggers. And in the future, if robots are looking more and more like us, how that's going to look like, how our society is going to look like, right? I met this startup. I mean, they look, to be honest, quite creepy at this point. But robots, they get better and better at mimicking emotions. And those guys were trying all kinds of emotions out. You would stand in front of the camera, you would smile, and the robot would smile with you. Then he would frown, the robot would frown, and it would get very, very scary, weird-looking expressions sometimes, so it wouldn't work that well. But ever since, I've seen much, much more sophisticated stuff out there, right? So it's moving very, very, very fast. This is an Estonian startup. They're called Starship Technologies. So they built this little delivery thing, right? They completely automated. They will bring stuff to your doorstep. And if you order a pizza, you just walk out, you just open the trunk, you get your pizza out, and that's it. That's their vision of how delivery should be done. Or other visions, I'm sure you heard about the drones, Amazon delivery. They're out there already, right? They're building drones that like capsules that can just pick up people and transport them from one place to another. The question right now is not so much the technology, it's like regulatory issues, right? How are we going to handle this? How are we going to manage all this? I mean, I'm sure you have maybe kids or yourself play around with drones. They're already everywhere. And this is going to be more and more the case. And as we were walking through this building, we see those kids play around with the drones, right? Pick stuff up, transport them. And we're discussing how that's transforming our lives. I told Nigel, when I met this Dutch startup, became friends, what they do is they essentially transform water to disinfectant, electromagnetic process, which is completely sustainable. So you can drink the water, wouldn't recommend it, will kill all bacteria in the body, but you could. But think about what that does to ag tech, where you go to, like a field, you spray it with water instead of pesticides. And I thought this is a no-brainer. I thought, okay, this is going to be huge. It's taking them so long to get out there simply because they have such a massive force against them. Traditional companies that are trying to prevent this because they will lose profit. We've seen the same with electric car manufacturers, right? I remember very, very well, the beginning of the 90s, I was watching this TV show, big show, electric car comes on the stage, everybody's cheering, said, this is the future, then you hear nothing. A couple years later, again, the 90s, I see a different TV show, the same thing, another car drives up the stage, everybody's cheering, electric cars, it's the future. We're in 2016. Essentially, it took us until Tesla, so this is really getting slowly coming mainstream, and the lobby of the oil companies, it's been tipped over, and people realize, okay, there's no way of stopping this, right? But think about what technology has done on a much, much more granular level, for instance, to social, how we engage now online, Facebook. These are all things that are happening in the background, but it's really changed how we interact. If you look at virtual reality, this is going to change the game even further. And very hard to imagine right now. So this is a video, they're building game centers right now, like a laser game, like a hall where you would do the laser gaming. They're building those centers where you walk around with gear, virtual reality gear, and you're like on a different planet, right? You're walking through this hall, you would engage with things, and you would pick up a small sun, for instance, right, which would be a ball in the hall, but you think you have a sun in your hand, you would experience a $1.3 billion and that do not have a complete product. They're essentially the prototype stage, raising $1.3 billion from Google and Alibaba. And no one knows what this is going to be. The only thing people have seen so far are demos. And everybody says it's amazing. The team is amazing. I mean, they must be amazing if they raise 1.3 pre-product. But this is either going to be a massive flop or this is going to be an incredible, incredible new revolution of augmented reality. Something Google tried with glasses, but we weren't there yet. But it's going to come. It's going to come. And we're going to have a virtual layer over everything. So we walk around, see those kids have all kinds of different gears, wearables. We discuss how everything is moving mobile, how we engage with different interfaces, but also how we express ourselves. And how this is going to look like in the future. I don't know how fast it's going to go or to what extent this is going to happen, but I've met several startups that have built very sophisticated clothing that's changing based on how you feel, based on your environment, based on how people interact with you. So one specific example was a startup that had cameras inside of the clothing that would track eyeballs, and based on where you look and what part, that would change form and color. I'm not sure whether it's useful, but certainly this can change completely how we interact, right? How this is going to look like. And of course, all the wearables, which right now are watches, jewelry. I met this startup in London. They build chips for jewelry makers, and they integrate with payment providers, and essentially you can just use whatever you have, make payments, in the future much, much more. Augmented reality we talked about. In the future, this might just be lenses. Right now, we need a screen, we need a laptop, but you can't project that screen anywhere. You will always have it with you. We have spray that we can spray over a wall, can turn any wall into a screen. And not that far in the future, it's wherever we are, we will have our screen with us, right? It's always there. And of course, the giant mess that we call IoT. But we're making the internet smarter and smarter and smarter, right? And think about all those different things we connect to the internet, all the sensors everywhere, and they're looking cute, right? You guys remember George Orwell, the whole thing about privacy, cameras everywhere? I mean, he will watch much, much, much further than this, right? Think about where the cameras are nowadays. We put like cute little owls in our living room. Like, oh, they're so cute. Like taping everything, right? There's cameras everywhere. The future more and more so. And we're building this giant network. Looks a little bit like a brain, doesn't it? It's interesting to note that the amount of nodes on the internet is slowly approaching the amount of neurons we have in our brain. It's a nice analogy, right? Which inevitably leads us to this topic, which is a big hype. We're all talking about this. Nobody really knows where this is going to go. There's all kinds of people like Ray Kurzweil who predict by 2045 we're going to reach a singularity where artificial intelligence is going to surpass our collective knowledge of all human brains on Earth. And I don't know whether that timing is going to work. My feeling tells me no, but when I look at all those different startups working on amazing things, it's definitely going to go much, much, much faster than we predict, but I think in different ways. And I don't believe that a consciousness as such is going to emerge very soon, but I think we're going to see disruptive elements, and also in a negative way, already very soon. What I worry about more than the big AI taking over is I worry about malicious niche AIs, bots that are built, that are launched in the internet and that we cannot control or that we cannot really predict what they do. I met this startup, they're building bots and they're trying to teach themselves how to make a profit. I mean, right now it doesn't work, but they launched those bots on the internet, like trying to make a profit. As this is getting more and more sophisticated, what does it mean? They're going to exploit loopholes. They might do illegal stuff. We don't know. There might be super viruses. It's very, very, very hard for us to predict. And that's what I worry about much more. And I see it happening already now on a smaller scale. And every startup pitch I hear nowadays will have something about machine learning. Mostly, it's just because they want to raise money. Machine learning sounds great, but it's there. It's everywhere. Personal assistant. So I'm convinced that the next trillion-dollar company is going to be the company that nails personal assistants. Whether that's going to be Google, Amazon, Facebook. The company that nails this is going to be the biggest company in the world. Why? Because that's our one interface to everything. Now we have Siri on Apple, which quite frankly is not that great, but the ex-founders of Siri created something new. It's called Viv. You should look it up, Disrupt. They have a demo. It's incredible, right? They managed to build code that writes code. It's still, I mean, small version, but very, very sophisticated technology. They integrate, they have built a platform that Uber and all kinds of third-party providers can build upon, and it's much, much better than Siri. And they're going to be bought, at least I think they're going to be bought, and whoever, big company that has all the data, that develops this and is building the best PA, they're going to have access to all of us. Because what used to be Google, we all go to Google now, the next thing is going to be that one PA that's the best one. We're all going to just talk to that entity. And that personal assistant is going to look up at Google or take all the information that we need from the sources out there. But we're not going to go directly to Google anymore. So there's so much more. Quantum computer, like nanotechnology, health tech extending our lives, like it goes on and on and on. The reality is every single industry, there's technology out there that's incredible. The only question is timing. My physics teacher used to say, if you run against a wall often enough, eventually you will pass right through. So, we don't know exactly when, as a society, we're ready, when the tipping point is there, but all those technologies are going to hit us and going to disrupt how we live, how we engage. So as we're walking in Tumo, in the center, I was thinking about if I would have passed by this building, I would have never known. I mean, it looks like a nice building, but I would have never known what's happening inside. And I think if you look at the internet, the things I mentioned are the most visible things out there. What is much more interesting is all the stuff you don't see, what I call the enablers. Right? It's like cloud computing, it's machine learning as a service, it's all this stuff that happens in the background, it's all those building blocks, the platforms that are built. And the reason innovation is accelerating is because we can all use those Lego blocks and build it. Everyone in this room can go out there and either for free or paid, get those building blocks, put them together, and then put your own block on top of it, build your own thing. That's why it's growing so fast. That's why change is exponential, and you see so much innovation happening everywhere, because we can all experiment. So after we walk out this building, it was hard for me to leave. We go to dinner again. Sit down with Nigel, and I have a drink, and I said, Nigel, how about that cheese? And he says, oh, yeah, they're right, the cheese. So he tells me that he got admitted to a chemical warfare program in the UK after his studies. He was very secretive about it, but he told me some stuff that he learned there. Then our discussion went off like 20 different ways how we could destroy Earth with nanotechnology, artificial intelligence, and a lot of other technologies. And I said, Nigel, look, back to the cheese. Tell me, how about that cheese? And he says, okay, look. I realized that at the end of the day, technology can be both incredibly beautiful and incredibly harmful. And I had to make a choice. They offered me to build weapons, and I didn't want to do it. And for me, it all boiled down to discipline. So I thought, how can I test my discipline every day? And I thought about what do I love most? And that was cheese. So I started with a challenge for a year not to eat any cheese. And then after a year, I thought up a new challenge and a new challenge. And now this year, my challenge is not to drink alcohol. So as I was reflecting on this, making this presentation, I thought about this, and I thought, he's right. With all this technology out there and all those developments, it is about discipline. It's about us doing the right things. When it comes to entrepreneurs, I think discipline is one of the most critical factors for success. I was reflecting on Tumo and education. And what kids are learning nowadays, the access everybody has to knowledge that we didn't have. At least I didn't have to that extent when I was growing up. And what this will do to our society and how kids already now are building stuff at an age where I wasn't even thinking about building stuff. Nowadays we have entrepreneurs that are 12 years old. When I was 12 years old, I was certainly not thinking about entrepreneurship. And I was thinking about Nigel. about the entrepreneur I met, all the challenges he went through, and I smiled and was thinking, finally Nigel can have his cheese again, and now with a bottle of wine. Thank you.